if you're not showing up authentically you in a safe, steady, grounded seat of who you are, then people are going to know. It's just not going to work. And people would often say to me, like, why do you think you're so successful? Why do you think that people are reading your books or watching your videos or listening to your podcast? Because I am grounded in who I am. I'm speaking from my own authentic truth. And if something I'm not ready to speak about, I won't touch it.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. On this episode, we got Gabby Bernstein. For over 16 years, Gabby has long been loved by her readers as a spiritual teacher, motivational speaker, and a catalyst for profound interchange. She's a New York Times #1 best-selling author who's penned 9 books, including her most recent, which is out right now, Happy Days, The Guided Path from Trauma to Profound Freedom and Inner Peace. She's been an expert on Today, Good Morning America, other publications. Oprah's called her a new thought leader. She's also the host of her own podcast called Dear Gabby. I'm truly excited for this one. You're not going to want to miss this. Check it out. Gabby, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
It's so nice to be with you. You have lovely energy. Like the moment we entered, I was like, I like this dude. This is nice.
I love that. Thank you. Look, for the listeners right now who may not have had the pleasure of being acquainted with you or getting to know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started? I think your journey's super incredible. I know it, and I know you've battled some inner battles, but I'd love to hear how you became, the transformational person, the New York Times bestseller. What did Oprah call you? The new thought leader. So I'd love to hear your journey, and I think it will benefit the listeners a lot.
Absolutely. So I've been on an entrepreneurial path and a spiritual path side by side for 22 years. Oh my God, I'm aging myself. But I did start my career when I was 20. And I began promoting nightclubs. I was really good at getting people to the clubs. I was making a lot of money. And I was like, wow, I don't have to ever work for anybody. I know how to make money. And I never wanted a job. I never wanted a boss because I knew that I would just try to take over the company at 20 and like pretend like I knew everything. And anyone that's entrepreneurial can resonate with what I'm talking about. That feeling of like, I just don't have the desire to be told what to do. I want to figure it out on my own. I want to create. I want to run the show. I want to be creative. I want to be innovative. And I could say yes to anything. Like anything I wanted to do, I was going to put my mind to. And so at the time I was into partying in nightclubs in New York City, I was living. And so I started promoting nightclubs and quickly transitioned it when I was 21 to turn that into a nightlife PR business. I was 21 to 25 when I ran that business. And in that time, I ran the business. It was very profitable. It was doing great. We were well known. It was me and a partner. I was very good at selling our services. I figured it out because I didn't have any degree in PR. I just knew I liked going to the clubs, knew I could promote the parties, and then started pitching them to the press and just was a publicist. I just figured it out. And I was good at sales, so I just made it happen. But by the middle of this career, I was not only doing great at work, but I was also partying a lot. That partying turned into a casual cocaine habit, which ultimately became a very destructive cocaine habit, which brought me to my knees at 25. And at the time, I was always on a spiritual quest. And I had been since I was a child. My mom taught me how to meditate as a child. And so that foundation was placed within me. But I had turned my back on it with the drugs and alcohol. And then when I decided to get clean and sober, there's a lot more detail to this story, but I want to get to the good stuff. When I decided to get clean and sober, it was really, really clear to me that I wanted to take the spiritual principles that I was applying and learning and living by now as a sober young woman and express them through a medium that I was already familiar with as a public speaker. Because even when I was doing marketing and PR, I was speaking publicly for free for 5 years, just in marketing classrooms, NYU, Baruch, Syracuse. I was just speaking wherever I could because I loved it. And so I said, okay, let me take that skill, that passion for motivational speaking and use it to share and serve in a transformational way, in a way that's going to teach people about spirituality and crack people open to what it means to have a spiritual connection. And so I started that career as being a spiritual teacher, motivational speaker when I was 25. I published my first book when I was 28. And I've written 9 books in 11 years. And the journey of being an author and a speaker has not only been a journey of being in the service of others, but also greatly being in the service of myself. Because in order for me to put my face on these books and really stand behind the messages, I've had to live them. And that brings us to today, which is this, my new book, Happy Days, The Guided Path from Trauma to Profound Freedom and Inner Peace, is a culmination of decades of personal growth that have now developed into a beautiful memoir and guidebook for everyone that's suffering in any form that wants to feel better.
I'd also imagine that it's a decade of different mindset shifts. And I know you're very big on mindset shifts. What's one of the most important mindset shifts that we could make that will benefit us the most?
Self-compassion. We spend most of our days in this storyline of, oh, I fucked that up, or, judging ourselves or comparing ourselves, or feeling bad about the ways that we didn't show up the best we could, or thinking we have so much more to do, overworking, overwhelm, burnout. What if we just spent our days leading our life through the lens of self-compassion? That would be really different. If I was trying to, be in my workaholic mode that I've recovered from, I would have been like showing up to this really exhausted, really burnt out, like, okay, man, I got to get going. But instead, I'm really loving and compassionate and courageous and confident. And I just lean into that feeling every day. And that self-compassion is like, okay, you need to shorten that podcast later. Okay, do it. 15 minutes. You need an extra 15 minutes, like whatever it is. That level of thinking and treating myself has been radically transformational.
I agree. And I think entrepreneurs are more guilty of this than anyone else. I think as entrepreneurs, and you're an entrepreneur, you get this, is we take on our clients' problems at times as well, right? So we have our own problems, and then we go to bed taking on our clients' problems, and we carry a lot of baggage with us that our clients don't even realize that we take on. But when you're the head of the business, there's a lot of fires that you're dealing with. There's a lot of responsibility that you have. How do you then balance that, right? How do you balance that? I need to take this on. I need to be the leader. I need to be hardworking. I need to do all this, but then have that almost like that inner peace type of moment.
Yeah. Well, read the book. I joke, but it's true. I mean, this book is absolutely effective for anyone who in any way is taking on that pressure. But what I would say is, whatever we take on from others, or the expectation that others have of us, isn't actually going to benefit them. There's no amount of our suffering that's going to benefit your client or your partner or your child or anything. So the more that you work on this is for any human, but let's speak directly to the entrepreneur right now. The more personal growth work that you do to clean up the shit from your past and to reprocess how you can be steady and calm and feel safer in your body in the present, the better employer you'll be, the better you will be for your clients. You won't be as reactive. You won't be burnt out. You'll have clear boundaries. You'll have clear boundaries that don't make you look like an asshole. Do you know what I mean? Like, the difference between clear boundaries. Yeah, it starts with you, because, I work with so many independent contractors, and it's funny because I got on with you just now and I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, let me tell you more about your work. I was like, oh, I want to interview you. And it wasn't because like I had this like long list of why from Molly, which I'm sure she'll give me anyway, or because I'd done so much research on you. I'm just literally jumping in from podcast to podcast right now. Forgive me. But because of your vibe, I was like, oh, this guy's confident. Like, this guy knows what he's doing. And that is what I call your super attractor power. And so I don't know necessarily if you've done a lot of transformational work or anything, but I do get a sense that you have a connection to your own confidence. And that's a quality that I think only comes with some inner work and some awareness.
Do you think there is, and thank you for those kind words, but do you think there is balance? Like I was talking to Randi Zuckerberg about this, and she was saying there's no such thing as this balance, right? It's lopsided. You have to deal with certain moments, and there's there's, some moments you're more in work and some moments you have more of that inner peace, and you have to find those times. Do you think there is absolutely that work life and that spiritual balance?
Yeah, 100,000%. Listen, I've lived both sides of it. So I can say yes, 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 yes. But the balance, and this is going to sound heady, but I really mean this. This isn't just some spiritual mumbo jumbo. My cat's crying outside, my kitten. I might have to let her in. Here, I'll let her in. But the thing I want to make sure I'm very clear about is that balance has to come from your own internal condition. Come in, girl. And if you're not steady in your system, then you're gonna act out with workaholic behavior, burnout behavior. That's all your own stuff. You're running from an impermissible feeling that you haven't worked out. You're running from a reactivity that you haven't healed, or a belief system about yourself that you haven't healed. And so when you heal those patterns, you can be mad busy like I am right now, but still be balanced. Because I've healed a lot of those storylines from my past, I don't feel inadequate if I'm not overworking myself. I don't feel like I can't get it done. And I also know that I can care for myself along the way.
When you started putting yourself out there and talking about your story, I think in my line of work, I see a lot of people who are afraid of putting themselves out there, whether it's imposter syndrome or probably the number one factor is fear of being judged, right, by others, especially on social media. What advice do you have for the listeners who are feeling that way? They think they have a message to put out on social media, but they don't want, they either their fear of the zero people show up to watch their live, or the imposter syndrome, or their fear of being judged.
If you're not showing up authentically you in a safe, steady, grounded seat of who you are, then people are going to know. It's just not going to work. And people would often say to me, like, why do you think you're so successful? Why do you think that people are reading your books or watching your videos or listening to your podcast? Because I am grounded in who I am. I'm speaking from my own authentic truth. And if something I'm not ready to speak about, I won't touch it. I won't speak of it. I've been in this field for 16 years. And if you will listen to one of my talks from a decade ago, you'll feel the same authentic connection, but you might not hear as deep or vulnerable of a story because I wasn't there then. I was in a different story then. But the authenticity is there because I was teaching from where I am. So teach from where you are. Don't pretend to be somewhere else. Because the moment that you notice yourself like being anybody but you, you've lost the audience.
In your line of work, when you're dealing with people, where do you find most people get stuck? And you talked about this. I think you talked about like the patterns that keep them unhappy in that loop that they stay in. What's the most common pattern, and where do you find most people end up being stuck?
I think people get stuck with fear. Fear is, particularly in entrepreneurial settings, fear is often a driver, but it's also a block. So the way that it's driving you is a unbalanced, extreme way. So maybe you think, okay, my fear is why I have this edge. But what if you could just soften that edge? You could still get a lot more done, probably way more done. And so fear, when it's driving the show, is actually blocking you from attracting what it is that you really want, because it's like a really frantic energy. And so it's deflecting the clients, it's deflecting your own stamina. It's taking a toll on your body. And the fears that we carry into our careers and into our life and into our relationships are unresolved from our childhood. They're unresolved experiences. You can call, I refer to them as trauma with a big T, trauma with a small t. Trauma with a small t that affected my career was when I was in 6th grade. A boy told me I was stupid, and I just took that storyline on. And
It's amazing what we hold on to, eh?
It's incredible. And I went on and on and on for years with that storyline, only until really recently. It almost held me back from writing my first book. And then it also gave me a lot of momentum too, because I was like, I'm going to prove myself to the fucking world, So it had value, but not in a good, non-extreme way. Now it has great value because I've gotten myself back to a place of reprocessing that fear. And now I wrote, in order to write this book, I had to do a tremendous amount of research. I got trained in a therapeutic system recently that I fell in love with. It supported me, and I write about in the book. And so I'm doing things in my education that I'd never done before because of that recovery.
Do you find there's a benefit, like especially for entrepreneurs or high motivated people, to use that, whether it's a little T trauma or the fear, and use it almost as a chip on their shoulder?
Oh, yeah. So small T trauma is like what I mentioned. A big T trauma is sexual violence or being neglected as a child or having an alcoholic parent or the big stuff, the tragedy or living through, an earthquake or things that are really, really disruptive to your nervous system and particularly repeated often. But both big T and small T trauma have a major effect on the way that you show up for your life. I once had a therapist that said that your trauma, that even the way you brush your teeth has a connection to the unresolved trauma. It's crazy, but it's true. And so the ways that we show up in life can be really extreme as a result of those unresolved wounds. It shows up in work a lot. I see this a lot in the entrepreneurial space, particularly with men and women. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. The workaholic, the achievement junkie, the burnt out person that's running the business, I see it because I was it. I lived it. You almost, when you talk to those people, they're like so burnt out that you can just sense that they're on the edge of cracking, but they're kind of like trying their hardest to keep their shit together. That's so common in the entrepreneurial realm because while the work is really fun and inspiring and productive and maybe even really serving the world, it's also a form of running from impermissible feelings. And so when you're in that extreme role of entrepreneurship, of pushing yourself against the wall, throwing yourself against the wall, falling apart, getting back on your feet, you are absolutely running from something. And that's the first exercise in this book, Happy Days, is to really help the reader recognize their triggers, what happens in their body, how they react, and why they're running, what they're running from.
Interesting. I know I have you for a short period of time, so I want to touch on something that's super common now, is anxiety, right? It's a big issue right now, especially in the entrepreneur world, and especially given what the last 2 years have been. We're seeing a giant increase in anxiety. I know it's something you're passionate about too, and you have your thoughts on it and ways to deal with it. I'd love to hear for the listeners who may be battling it. What's your advice?
Most people are suffering with anxiety right now. My advice is first and foremost, just stop resisting it. So you could even talk to your anxiety. All right, I see you. I notice you. What do you need from me? How can I help you? Not what do you need from me, but like, how can I be of service to you? Like, what can I do to help you? And then listen. If you don't hear anything back, which is possible, then there's plenty of practices I can give you to start to regulate. But I think the first step is to notice it and be compassionate toward it and be curious about it and be courageous enough to just settle for a moment and just listen. Because what happens is we have the anxiety running in the background and then we run so we don't have to let it keep feeling. But as we start running from it, what we resist will persist. So it will just activate and activate and activate. Start by settling and noticing it and sending it compassion and love. Then place your right hand on your heart and your left hand on your belly. And you could do some breath work. Breathe in for 2 strokes in your nose and 1 stroke out your mouth. So it would sound like this. 2 strokes in, 1 stroke out. I feel relief even just in that second. Like I just settle. Other things that you could do to relieve anxiety. You can tap on this one point. This is emotional freedom technique, which I write about in the book. But the point is between your pinky finger and your ring finger on the top of your hand. And there's a little bit of flesh there, I guess it's right there. And you just tap, tap, tap on that point. And this point is an acupressure point that sends a message to your nervous system, to your vagus nerve, that it can relax and settle. And while you tap that point, you can just say this affirmation. I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. You could say something else to yourself that feels more relevant. It's safe to calm down. I let go. I surrender. I give up, whatever your language is. And just tap on that point, tap on that point, tap on that point. And the affirming how you want to feel while tapping on that point sends a major message to your nervous system quite quickly that you can settle. These are methods and tools, but they're really band-aids and they work. I'll say that again. These are methods and tools, but they're really band-aids. They work. They absolutely work, but they won't be sustainable and long lasting if you aren't doing the deeper inner work. And it's interesting, I really pray that a lot of entrepreneurs find this book, Happy Days, because I feel that so many entrepreneurs burnt out, overworked, workaholics, judgmental of themselves, while they're extraordinarily successful and they have so much greatness to bring to the world, I do believe that often we find an entrepreneurial path because we want to prove something. And so how different would you be? How different would your career be if you stopped running it from a place of wanting to prove something and started running it from just a place of peace? I'll speak for myself. My business is a lot fucking better than I'm running it from a place of peace. My team is much more aligned with me. They trust me. I have clear boundaries. I just so much more manifest in my life because I'm not pushing or trying to make it happen. I just let it happen. Pretty cool.
We'll make sure that we promote the book as much as possible for all the entrepreneurs to read it. I'm going to let you go with this one question because we touched on this earlier, and that's a super attractor. How does one become a super attractor and kind of live that? I know you're also a big believer, and I think my biggest change in my success in my career came when I learned that the abundance mindset and not the scarcity mindset. And I think there's a lot of people who could benefit from that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on both those things.
We're all super attractors. We just block it. So the lack mentality is blocking the abundance mentality that's within us. The way that we become a super attractor is it's not just about focusing on an abundance mentality and focusing on manifesting. That's all great. That's a better way to focus. But the real work is about relieving the patterns and neural pathways of lack, the patterns and neural pathways of fear, the parts that we've been talking about that have been running the show in such extreme ways have to be relaxed in order for us to fully clear space for that super attractor energy. And when you're a super attractor, what you believe you will receive, when your energy is in that settled state and inspired simultaneously, you become a magnet for what you desire, and you can do less and attract more. That's a whole other book I wrote.
Well, Gabby, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Gabby's new book, Happy Days, The Guided Path from Trauma to Profound Freedom and Inner Peace, is out right now. Go follow Gabby across all social media platforms. And we'll put in the show notes, but we're going to give away 10 copies of your book. I'll send the listeners 10 copies of your book to 10 different listeners. I'll put in the show notes how to do that.
Yay.
Gabby, any final words for the audience?
Yeah. I would say I wrote this. I have this PDF that I'll give you for your show notes, and it's 10 ways to succeed as a spiritual entrepreneur. And so if you identify with any of the things that I've mentioned here, or if you're listening and you're like, I want to bring more manifesting into my work and I want to feel more relief from my career, I think that's a really nice resource I could give people. And I'll give you the link.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want, check out our most recent video over here. And this one is the one YouTube thinks you'll like. But if you really enjoyed watching, please do me a favor, like and subscribe over here. Thank you so much.